So, let's talk about T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. I mean, it's one of the great poems of the 20th century. It's famous for being dense, difficult, and people have been picking it apart for 100 years now. But what if, after all that time, we're still missing something? Something huge that Eliot himself never really spelled out? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into. And to really get to the bottom of his work, we're not going to start with a bunch of footnotes or fancy literary theory. No, we're going to start with a much simpler, kind of strange question. I want you to forget the famous poet for a second and just picture this. What if T.S. Eliot lived next door? See, on the one hand, you've got the literary monument, right? The historical voice, the genius of modernism, all safely tucked away in a book. But on the other hand, you have the actual man, back around 1920. He's just a quiet neighbor, works at a bank, seems a little distant, maybe carries this heavy silence around with him. And that shift in perspective, it's everything. It takes the poem from being some academic puzzle and turns it into something deeply, deeply human. So, to really understand the man behind the monument, we have to step into his world. Let's go back to London, right after the First World War. This wasn't the city of some literary giant. Not yet. It was the city of a quiet bank employee, just trying to navigate a world that felt, well, fundamentally broken. You know, the general vibe at the time was all about progress, about rebuilding and moving forward. But Eliot, he sensed something else was going on, something deeper. He felt like the war hadn't just knocked down buildings. It had shattered some kind of shared foundation, a common meaning. He saw this crack running through the world that everyone else was desperately trying to paper over. And this, right here, this is the heart of it. The Wasteland wasn't written to teach us a lesson. It was an attempt to capture a feeling, this powerful, unsettling awareness that the world had lost its center, and all the old explanations just didn't hold up anymore. It was really an act of incredible honesty about a massive cultural crisis. Okay, so now we're going to shift from the big societal picture to something intensely personal. Because this feeling, this idea of a world without a center, it wasn't just something Eliot was observing on the streets of London. He was living it every single day inside his own home, in his very troubled marriage to his wife, Vivian. And here you see this incredible contrast in how two people dealt with pain. Eliot, he managed it by pulling back, retreating into silence in the careful, precise control of language. But Vivian, she was the opposite. She needed to speak, to express. She lived right inside the very emotional chaos that he was trying so hard to observe and structure from a distance. And this brings us to one of the most haunting feelings in the entire poem. This idea of voices speaking without being heard. It's this theme of profound disconnection that runs through his work, and you have to think it came from this deeply personal, unshared inner world he was experiencing every single day. So you can imagine, this combination of pressure from the broken world outside and the silent chaos inside his home, it all led to a breaking point. But right there, in the middle of that crisis, Eliot found a really difficult, almost brutal kind of clarity. This was about finding honesty, not easy answers. I mean, just look at the timeline. It's pretty dramatic. In 1920, he's that quiet bank employee. Just 1 year later, he has a complete breakdown and gets sent to a sanatorium in Switzerland. Then, a few years after that, he makes a choice that changes everything for him. He converts to Christianity. So what on earth happened in Switzerland? Well, alone, away from everything, he was forced to face this massive question, this crushing exhaustion he was feeling. Was it a personal failure? Was he just not strong enough? Or was he more like a canary in a coal mine? You know, feeling the symptoms of a much bigger cultural sickness. And this is the conclusion he came to. His breakdown wasn't just his. It was a reflection of the world's breakdown. Now, this realization didn't magically bring him peace, but it did bring a powerful kind of honesty. And that honesty became the absolute, unflinching core of the Wasteland. And this perspective really helps us understand his later conversion. For a massive intellectual like Eliot, faith wasn't about finding a neat little package of answers. It was an act of humility. It was about accepting the limits of what a person can know, and finally letting go of that exhausting need to explain and control everything with language. So why does this 100-year-old story of a poet's crisis matter to us, right now? Because what Eliot left behind wasn't just a poem. He left behind a question, a really big one that, in a way, we've all inherited. So what's his real legacy? Well, it's definitely not a set of solutions. It's more like a posture, a way of being in the world. He gave us a model for how to stand right in the middle of uncertainty without lying to ourselves about it. He didn't ask us to be hopeful, not really. He invited us to be awake to how things really are and to accept that some of life's biggest questions just can't be resolved. And this is the question he leaves for us. It honestly feels more relevant today than ever before. In a world that is screaming for quick answers and simple stories, how do we live with all the complexity and uncertainty without just pretending it isn't there? In the end, what that quiet neighbor, the bank employee T.S. Eliot, really showed us is that refusing to accept easy answers isn't a sign of failure. Choosing that unflinching honesty over the comfort of being certain, well, that's not weakness. It's a profound and totally necessary form of discipline.